Howdy, as he said, I'm Jeffrey Snover, technical fellow at Microsoft. I'm also the chief architect of Azure Storage, Media, and Cloud Edge. I used to be the chief architect of Windows Server, but most people know me as the inventor of PowerShell. If you're not up to date on current events, PowerShell is now open source and available on Linux. Thank you. So if you haven't tried it, it runs wonderfully on Linux. It's been our dream to do that since the beginning. Anyway, so give that a try. Today I'm going to take a different kind of topic. I'm going to talk about doing the right thing, about software in an age of social responsibility. This is a very different talk than I'm used to giving. We'll see how it goes. But I think we're at a very important time in our industry, and I think it's time for us to stop and to start asking ourselves some difficult questions. So, the three things I want to cover in this talk are why we need to become better engineers, what the issues here are, and then how do we move forward, right? How do we actually make concrete steps in progressing these issues? So first I want to start the talk by discussing Marc Andreessen's paper. In 2011, he wrote the paper, Software Eats the World. Okay? And here in this paper, if you haven't read it, I strongly encourage you to do it. Pretty short paper. He lays out two hypotheses. Number one, software is eating traditional businesses. So think about Uber eating taxis, right? Ads being taken over by Google, music by iTunes and Spotify. The second thing he said was, even for those industries that are not going to be replaced by software, the products be replaced by software, the value of the product, software is a larger and larger component of the value chain of that software. The clearest example of this is cars. Okay? Average car today ships with somewhere between 10 million and 100 million lines of code. The richer, the more luxurious cars have more code. It does stuff like engine control, safety systems, infotainment, navigation, etc. So the more software, the more value. So basically he's saying software is eating the world. This is a list of the largest companies rated by market value in 2017. The highlighted ones are companies whose primary value is delivered through software. Okay? That is over half of the largest companies in the world. Now, when Andreessen wrote this document in 2011, this was the list of top-rated companies. Okay? The highlighted ones are those whose value is primarily driven through software. Okay? So Andreessen writes this, he has a hypothesis. This is the way the world looks. 6 years later, over half of the largest companies in the world are driven by software. Now, even the ones that aren't there, that I identified as primarily being driven through software, a number of them are on this list. Every company is viewing themselves as a software company or as a company whose core value is going to be driven forward through software, right? So Jamie Dimon, he's looking at Silicon Valley as being the big threat to his business, right? He's not looking at across the street at other financials companies. He's looking to the valley, seeing where the disruption's going to come from there. GE, same thing, Walmart, Ford, all these companies are viewing them, they're disruptors and potential competitors coming from software companies. Okay, so software is important. So what? Right? Well, let's do some engineering, right? That's what we are. We're engineers, so let's do some engineering. I picked a date of like 40 years from now, right? So there's this law of accelerating returns. We've all seen these charts before, but I kind of went out 40 years, right? And the reason why I picked 40 years is I think most people will be in the industry about 40 years. I know, sadly to say, I'm coming up on my 40 year in the industry in a couple years from now. But basically what this chart is showing is the calculations per second per $1,000, okay? And what this is showing, what the heck's that thing? Okay, I'm confused. Anyway, what this is showing is that about 40 years, $1,000 is going to give you the compute power of all the existing human brains for under $1,000. Okay, so computers, you think they do a lot now. In the next 40 years, they're going to do even a lot more. Now, let's talk about where we are today, what the trends are, and then think through, well, what's this mean for the next 40 years, right? So today, we already have planetary scale cloud infrastructure, right? Microsoft, AWS, we're providing planetary scale compute infrastructure. If you haven't seen the numbers on this, they're truly astounding. Okay, we have 2.5 billion cell phone users. By 2020, we expect there'll be 6 connected devices per user. We already have smart homes, smart power grids, smart chemical processing plants, right? Intelligence in lots of things. Now let's look at the trends, right? Information and software, IT and software technology is driving more and more of information and education delivery, control over the physical world with things like IoT, biological control systems, real-time biological control systems. Scott Hanselman, a guy at Microsoft, talks about how he's got an artificial pancreas, literally an artificial pancreas, that's run off open source software. Wow. Like today, that's going on. Attention management systems, surveillance, professional cybercrime, national state cybersecurity. Well, wait a second, look at these trends, right? These are the trends. Now think about where these things are going to go in the next 40 years. These are some pretty important and some pretty scary things. Now my point to all this is, okay, so if software is going to eat the world, where did the software come from, right? And the answer is engineers. Right, what could possibly go wrong with that, right? Well, really my point is this. So if you and I, if we are building the fabric of the future, we really need to stop for a second and ask ourselves, what kind of a world do we want to build? Right? It's our responsibility. Now, a number of people will hear this and say, well, Jeffrey, what are you talking about? I just write code. And I'm here to say no. No, that's not the case. You are responsible for the moral actions of yourself and of your code. The fact that you're a member of a team does not diminish your moral responsibility. And say, well, I wasn't the only guy. I got 100 other people, 1,000 other people. You know, my role is not significant. No. Your role, you are fully responsible for the moral actions of your software. You have a voice in how your labor is applied to solve problems. And you have a lot more power than a lot of people appreciate. You have your choice of projects and employers. On Reddit, about a month ago, there was this thread. You know, what's the craziest or most embarrassing thing you ever did at a company? And someone said that their CEO basically wanted to spy on their customers and use personal information, something horrible and terrible, and that he did it for his boss. And he said that the boss couldn't get any of the senior people to do it, and that he was a junior guy, and he went to him and he didn't know what to do, and so he went and did it. Now the interesting thing about that was, and then he felt terrible about it. Okay? The interesting thing was that the CEO had previously gone to a bunch of other senior people and could not get them to do it, right? Here's the reality, right? I'm a Microsoft technical fellow. I participate in a lot of executive meetings, and a lot of what we do is to think through, one, what does the market need, and then two, what can we actually go do? A lot of things we don't do because, we want to make sure that the employees are going to buy in and do it, right? Which is not to say we're planning some nefarious things, but we'll look and say, hey, is this project, are people going to get on this project? Are they going to execute? Are they going to, associate their career with this project? Are they going to have fun? Are they going to stick with it? And if they aren't, then that project has lower probability of success. So in fact, we as engineers have a lot of say into what actually gets done. And I encourage everyone to think about this and to decide whether a company's business model and their moral standing aligns with yours before you take a job. You have a lot of power here. So, the future represents both great opportunities and challenges. But it's always been this way. Right? This is a moment in time, but we have had these moments in time before. I'm a strong believer in this idea of a fourth industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution being empowered by steam and mechanical production. The second generation industrial revolution was electrical and mass production. The third was electronics and IT. And now this fourth industrial revolution is driven off big data, cloud processing, intelligence, AI, etc. Now the interesting thing is, when you go back in history and you look at each one of these revolutions, there's surprising similarity. There's periods of great social disruption, right? If you remember the term Luddites, Luddites were a group of people revolting against steam engines. They went into the factory, said, hey, these steam engines are taking jobs, and destroyed the engines. Okay? So associated with each one of these eras is a period of social disruption and difficult issues that the engineering community needs to address. Okay? So technology disrupts everything in these revolutions. So today we deal with issues like, hey, are we going to have job displacement? Yeah, we are. To what degree? How? How's that going to play out? Community safety. The same technology that can provide community safety can also surveil citizens. So how do we find that right balance? Income inequality, unequal access. These are key discussions that are going on today. So think through opportunities, right? This chart shows someone's analysis of what AI will do to the GDP growth of various countries. And what they said was AI, when fully mature, will significantly add to the GDP of various countries. So that's fantastic. I mean, small movements in GDP have incredible benefits to society. But at the same time, AI is also going to replace a number of jobs, right? And it might replace full jobs, it might replace job tasks, and thus require jobs to be refactored. So there's great disruption there, and basically they showed this, what is the probability of automation by the different types of jobs. There are great opportunities, millions of people. One of the unsung stories is the story of optimism and progress in the world. The reality is that severe poverty in this world has been on the decline and continues to decline, and we have had literally hundreds of millions of people lifted out of abject poverty. So this is a fantastic story, right? So this plots percentage of the world population living in poverty. But at the same time, we've seen dramatic increase in income inequality. So this is mapping the share of global wealth versus the top 1%. And when you have that kind of disruption, that kind of inequality, it brings social disruption. We have great opportunities. This shows the internet access, the global users and penetration rate, so access to the internet. But this is also plotting cyber attacks, and this is just going to go up, up, up. Okay, so my point is that when you have these periods of transition, there are great opportunities, but there are great challenges. Okay, now again, this technology doesn't just transform business. Okay, it transforms society and has new challenges. This idea of move fast and break things, Right? Facebook did not make that up. That's been a trend for a long time. In fact, in the area of the steam revolution, we had a bunch of people who moved fast and broke things. And when they broke things, lots of people died, literally. Okay, so there was a lot of early steam designs that wasn't dialed in, and a lot of people died. And this led to a crisis, a tension between the technologists and general society. And the technologists had to respond and this was the foundation of the Mechanical Engineering Society, where they set up rules for designs, training, etc. And it also transforms society and raises new questions. Interpersonal relationships amongst and between groups changes with technology. The role of government is being questioned and reevaluated. And in a world where you can measure everything, privacy is becoming literally a crisis in our time. What is the right boundary for these things? So really what I want to say here is that as technologists, we need to step back and play the long game. Okay, the long game. So when you do a project, most of us already play the long game when it comes to the technology. Hey, this is a quick and dirty way to do it. Yeah, but is it the right way to do it? I like to say that I'm an architect, architects are the guardians of the future. What we do is we say, yep, that's the quickest way, but where do we want to go and how do we get there? How do we play the long game on the technology? But you also have to realize that you want to play the long game for business as well, right? Hey, what is the right business strategy? How does this help us move things forward? And the long game for society, right? Does this technology play a good citizen role in the society? Is it going to replace people? Is it going to advance mankind? Is it ethical? Is it legal? Now here I want to stop and point out something, that in America there is a great confusion. A lot of people believe that there's some sort of like a legal basis for a truly terrible and destructive idea. A number of people believe that it is a company's legal responsibility to maximize shareholder value. This is absolutely false. It is not. This idea, it's a terrible idea. I believe this is one of the most destructive ideas that has hurt our society. Now, this is an idea that came up in the 1970s. And by the way, let me be clear. Shareholder value is very, very important. Absolutely. It is one of the very important things that companies must address. But shareholders are just one of the many stakeholders in a company. There's shareholders, there's employees, there's the society, there are the customers. And it's the proper role of companies to maximize the benefit for all these constituencies. And this idea that the only responsibility is to maximize shareholder value is false. It is absolutely false. Now, as engineers, we want to build designs that maximize the benefit to everyone. Now, in the past, there was this idea about disabilities being a medical condition, right? And I think that there's a better way to think about this, right? And that disabilities are not just, permanent medical conditions, but they can be situational and they can be temporary conditions as well. And that by addressing our designs to help people with disabilities, we help a broad range of people and it helps our business. Okay? So it's the right thing to do and it helps our business. So imagine the case of touch. You might say, and by the way, this becomes very important, again, as you think in the context of the next 40 years, right? We are going to be building systems which empower and enable everything, right? Physical control systems, etc. So imagine you're building one of these things that require both hands. Well, okay, that means that people that don't have two arms can't use it. And you might say, well, how many people don't have two arms? I mean, most people have two arms. That's not a big deal. Well, it's a pretty big deal for the people who don't. But the second is, people have injuries, right? When you have an injury and your arm is a cast, you can only use one arm. But then there are also situations, right? A parent holding a child can only use one arm. So if you think through, how can I make my design accessible for people with disabilities, you help people who are temporarily disabled and people who are situationally disabled. Another example would be the blind, right? If you have an interface that requires sight, you cannot meet the needs of blind people. And again, you might say, okay, well, what's my addressable market of blind people? But you can also have difficulty reaching people, elderly people with cataracts. Guess what? There are a lot of baby boomers in America that are growing old and are going to get cataracts. That's a very large market. And there are people who are driving and can't be distracted by something that requires a visual interface. So again, if you can produce a user interface that can be used by people without sight, it can also be used by people with cataracts and people that are driving. So again, my point is we want to build systems that are inclusive, that meets the needs of all of the members of society. And in doing so, we do both the right thing and we maximize the benefit to our business. The real point I want to make here, another point, is that software is far too important to forget about ethics. Now, ethics is one of those like kind of difficult, fuzzy things, and you say, well, you know, do I have to get a PhD in ethics? Like, what do I do with that? And the answer is, look, it's not that hard. It's not that hard. When you deal with these issues, you know, when there's ever any doubt, you just focus in on solutions that amplify human dignity. Now, yesterday I was in the expo, and I was talking to Mad Dog John Madden, right? Mad Dog. What's John's last name? Hall. John Hall. John and I worked together at Digital, and we were talking about how at Digital they had one rule, and that rule was do the right thing. Do the right thing. And when I first started, I was like, what the heck's that mean? And later, I realized the wisdom of this approach. Digital believed in the individual. The individual, each of us are moral actors. And they had trust that each moral actor, when found in a situation, would figure out the right thing to do. But they actually gave them permission to do that and gave them responsibility to do that. They didn't say the right thing to do is X, Y, or Z. You can't do that because the situation's always going to change. What they said was, use your judgment, you're a moral actor, figure it out, do the right thing. And we saw that day after day. As issues came up, we would sit there and say, hey, what are we going to do, blah, 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 and well, this maximizes value, this gets us shortest time to market, but this was the right thing to do. And time after time, that simple phrase, do the right thing, changed the course of what we did and led to a better result. Now, there's a lot of optimism about AI today. I'm going to give you a short video, talk about how glorious AI is.
Innovation is not just a word, it's an action. With artificial intelligence, we are not crawling or walking or running, we are flying today. Microsoft AI helps an architect bring history back to life. He doesn't see data, he sees fragments of our past. This is now. Artificial intelligence helps farmers grow more food with less resources. She's not collecting information, she's feeding a growing population without wrecking the planet. This is real. An engineer explores how AI can help the deaf see sound. She's not looking at obstacles, she's staring down opportunity. Innovation doesn't see the possibility of tomorrow, it creates tomorrow. And are you ready for the headline? Tomorrow is here today.
Wow. So I love that, and I am truly optimistic about AI, what it is doing for us now, what it will do. And there's been some disappointments and setbacks. The real point I want to make here is that AI is not going to solve all our challenges. Zuckerberg says AI is going to solve Facebook's most vexing problems. Well, okay. Now, I don't want to sit here and throw rocks at other people. Microsoft has its share of problems as well. We had an idea about a conversational bot, Tay. We released this on the internet, and within 24 hours, she became a horrible, racist Nazi. Complete disaster. Now, we had some congressional districts reach out to see if she would run for office in those areas. But we made a moral judgment here and shut her off. Okay? It was not, it was just a joke, by the way. So when we build AI, we want to ask ourselves, there are just so many issues that we need to address when thinking about AI. One of them is this issue of, are we building inclusive AI, right? Are we building AI that moves the ball forward or shuts things down? In fact, artificial intelligence is really kind of a crappy word. I think it allows people to project their hopes, dreams, and ambitions into something that will not be fulfilled. Full stop. I think there are a couple better terms. First is AI, artificial intuition. Okay? Machine learning models are really about intuition. They take data sets, they find correlations, and then they have, it's like intuition. So imagine you're a loan officer and it's making decisions about loans. Well, if you had the intuition of Warren Buffett or Paul Volcker, that might be some, make some excellent intuitive calls, like, yeah, that looks like a good bet, that doesn't. But imagine your loan officer was Tay or Archie Bunker, right? I mean, you might say, well, okay, empirical results are that we're getting some good return on revenue, but I notice we haven't made any loans to diverse candidates, right? So the point is, you might ask the system, well, why did you make that call? There's no answer. Right? Just somewhere I had some data and it made me think this was a good idea, right? So there's no way to go in metaphysically and ask, why did this happen? So intuition's one thing. The point there being that it just drives intuitions and correlations based upon the data sets. So if you give it a bad set of data, then you get a bad set of results. So imagine feeding it a bunch of information, pictorial information about a medical situation with pictures from the 1950s and 1960s. Then when you saw a male, it would associate, oh, that's probably a doctor. And when you see a woman, you'd say, oh, that's probably a nurse. But today we'd say, no, that's an incorrect data model, right? That's not what we want. We want a model that is blind to those sort of things. So there's all sorts of biases that you can introduce to AI. I will also point out that AI, again, is a bad term. Now, I mentioned to you that at Digital, we believed in the moral capability of each person. Each human is a moral actor that is affected by their capacity for human empathy. It turns out that's not entirely true. That most people are, but that there's a small subset of people that have no human empathy. And there's a term for these people, and it's called psychopaths. Okay? Psychopaths have no human empathy. They can emulate it, they can be charming, they can be smart, they can be intelligent, but they have no human empathy. They are psychopaths. And indeed, I think it is a better way to think about what's going on here is it's not artificial intelligence, it's in fact psychopathic intelligence. I'm not making a joke here. There is no capacity for human empathy. Now, it might be useful, it might be smart, etc., but it is psychopathic. And just as you might say, hey, I've got a psychopath, they're very good at whatever, but I'm not going to, you will put boundaries on what you'll trust to a psychopath. In the very same way, we need to think about AI in those terms. It's psychopathic. Therefore, we need to understand where its strengths are, understand where its weaknesses are, and we need to put the boundaries and the checks on it, because it will not impose its own checks based upon moral issues or human empathy. Bottom line, AI will cause harm, full stop, right? There will be glitches as we advance the technology. There will be amoral applications. Machine learning makes fault attribution difficult and impossible. Now, 40 years from now, when we have fully autonomous cars, guess what? They're going to run over and kill people. But if today we say, hey, we can't have autonomous cars until metaphysically we're sure that they won't run over and kill people, we will not get autonomous cars. And guess what? A lot more people will die between here and now. So my point is that if we have backlashes and we have unrealistic expectations about AI and its ability to cause harm, those liabilities and losses will cause more harm. Okay, so again, fully autonomous cars 40 years from now, harm will happen, but the number of people will be less than if we don't have them. So we have this problem, like how do you move forward with this? And I assert that, again, looking to the past, we've had solutions for problems like this. Two very good examples are the Underwriter Labs and the American Vaccine Court. I think they provide excellent models. So the UL Labs, during one of these revolutions, the electrical revolution, the Chicago World's Fair was being fully electrified. We're going to show the world the magnificent world of electricity. A young engineer went there, saw a number of horrible things, some accidents, and out of that created the Underwriters Labs, right? Now, how many of you have purchased an electronic appliance in the last year? Everyone. Okay. Now, how many of you, when you were evaluating that electrical appliance, considered an alternative and chose between them based upon the probability that you were going to be electrocuted? One. Okay. Got to talk to you. No, none of us do that. Nobody except for him. And the reason why is the Underwriter's Lab. We all assume these electrical components are safe, and they are safe because of the Underwriter's Laboratory. You cannot sell an electrical appliance in America without it being UL certified. UL certification has a set of standards, a set of practices, a set of training, and a set of testing that is required before a component can be sold. And because of the great work that Underwriters Laboratories does, everybody except this guy just buys something without wondering whether or not they're going to be electrocuted. Underwriters Laboratory is an example of trust engineering. What they really do is they have engineered trust into the system. We buy things because we trust them. We don't even think about it. We're able to trust them because they did the hard work to harness the engineering community, to follow practices, to have professional standards, and rigorous testing. The National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. So in the 1980s, in America, most vaccine manufacturers stopped producing vaccines. The reason for this was there were a number of lawsuits with some very high awards. Now, the Congress was concerned about this. They considered it a national security issue. The threat of herd immunity to the country could be disastrous. And so what we did was we set up a no-fault system for litigating these vaccine claims. Basically, if vaccines were manufactured according to best practices and a harm occurred, right? Look, most people believe that vaccines are perfectly fine, but here's the reality. We are complex biological systems, and we never know how things can affect everyone. So, in fact, there might be some harm. But if 1 out of 1 billion people is harmed, and that results in a lawsuit that shuts down vaccine manufacturing, more people will be harmed. So what we did was we set up this alternative court system. We said, you produce these vaccines according to best practices. If something goes wrong, you cannot be sued in regular courts. We have a separate court system for this. There's a different burden of proof. That burden of proof, highly skewed towards the plaintiff. So it's very open. But the injuries are capped, right? The awards are capped, okay? And how is this done? It's funded by a vaccine tax by the manufacturers. This is the legal and social framework that acknowledges that risk and harm will occur, but as a society, we are far better off going forward with this according to the following best practices. I think we need something similar for AI. Great. All this good stuff. But how do I move forward, right? Like, Jeffrey, what do you want me to do? Set up Underwriters Laboratory? You want me to set up a national vaccine court? No. Each of us has a role, right? How do we move forward? First, each of us needs to acknowledge the issue, right? We have an evolving dilemma. Now, notice I didn't say problem. These are not problems. Problems have solutions. These do not have solutions. These are dilemmas. Dilemmas that evolve and have to be managed on an ongoing basis. So no, you can't just spend 2 weeks next year, solve this problem, and be done with it. It is something you need to allocate time and resources to from here on out. Right? We have a shared responsibility for the moral acts of ourselves and our products, and we need to shift our focus from shareholders to stakeholders. Number 2, educate yourself. These are not, you got to lean in. These are not simple issues. You got to lean in, educate yourself, find out what they are. Participate in the discussions. And number 3, what do? When faced with problems, this group, our tribe, we are engineers. We don't shy away, we don't shirk, we roll up our sleeves and we engineer. And that's how we're going to solve this problem. We're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to engineer our way out of this problem. How do you do that? We do what we do, right? We incrementally improve things. We incrementally improve ourselves, our teams, our products, and we build systems. We build systems that find problems and address problems. This was greatly highlighted by Secretary Bob Gates. Gates was the defense secretary under under Bush, and was asked to serve under Obama as well. They had all the cabinet secretaries get together for an offsite, and they said, Bob, you've been a secretary before. What advice would you give? And he said the following. At that very moment, one or more people in each of my colleagues' departments were doing something that was illegal or improper. He said the key was to have a mechanism to find these people before they did much harm. So what he told people was, you will have problems. You have problems today, you'll have problems tomorrow, you'll have problems the next day. Don't turn it into drama. Engineer your way out of this. Don't hide it, confront it. Build a system that finds it and addresses it. That's the mindset. We have this idea of Devops, right? Turns out Devops is the answer, right? So we have this idea of the law of the thirds. What's that all about? The answer is we have hypotheses. I bet you if we did this, things would get better. One of 3 things happen. You test that hypothesis. Your hypothesis is true. Keep doing it. Your hypothesis was false. Stop doing it. Or it didn't matter. Whatever. And so the key to DevOps is because it's all about these hypotheses, you want to iterate as quickly as possible, right? My joke is DevOps is really only 2 things. It is doing work in small batches very frequently and stop being a jerk to your coworkers, right? True. So the thing about doing work in small batches means that you can measure a hypothesis very, very quickly and adopt it or reject it and do it again and again and again. This is process engineering, right? Process engineering 101. You define a set of repeatable steps and you measure the outcome. You make those steps smaller. You do them faster. You automate the steps. Then you modify the steps and to optimize the outcomes. Modify a step. If it makes the outcome come up better, keep doing it. If it made it worse, stop doing it. If it didn't change it, whatever. And here is the key. As you have new problems, you create new measurements, and you modify the steps to optimize for them. Then what you do is you support and encourage guilds, people who are interested in a particular area. I'm interested in site reliability. I'm interested in security. I'm interested in social responsibility. I'm interested in AI ethics. Okay, you create guilds and have them encouraged. And just as many of us, as we go through our products, many of us have processes where we have patent reviews. Say, hey, before you get to this point in your process, stop and have a patent review, right? Because if you release it before you file your patents, you can't file your patents. Well, in the same way, we want to have introduce things like continuous security checks, accessibility checks, ethical, privacy, social justice reviews. Incorporate these into your processes, right? Have a guild of people. Now, at Microsoft, we're doing this. Right? At Microsoft, we're establishing, we've done this for security. We establish well-defined security guidelines. You don't get to write code at Microsoft unless you are certified for being able to write secure code. We have security guilds. We have security experts. Whenever an issue comes up, everybody doesn't have to be a security expert, but everybody needs to know when to bring in a security expert, and we bring them in. You want to do the same thing. You don't all need to be ethical experts in AI. You do all need to know when to bring in an ethical expert at AI, and then your company needs to have some of those. There's a great example, ethical. Now, a number of people are participating in this conversation. There's some very good thinking. Part of that lean in is to, and join the conversation, is to investigate these. Here's a great example. EthicalOS.org has a very good framework for thinking through what are the issues, when to engage them, and strategies for addressing them. So, how do I move forward? I find that whenever you want to make a change, whether it's a personal change, hey, I'm trying to lose some weight, you frame it in terms of when-thens. When I see that cheesecake, then I just keep walking, right? Walk around the block. With a series of whens-thens helps you turn goals into actions. So here's a series of when-thens to think through how to address some of these problems. So when you're setting up your CI/CD pipelines, your processes for which you're going to generate products, then add some ethical checkpoints, right? At what point are we going to go evaluate the ethical issues here? Where's my guild of experts that we can appeal to? When you are designing your software, then make sure you're being inclusive and incorporating diversity concerns. Are you addressing the needs of all of society or to a small subset? When you're buying products, pick the vendors that are committed to cybersecurity. One of the reasons why we have crap security is because people like us keep buying products that have crap security instead of favoring those products that have better security. When you hang out with your coworkers, start to have conversations about this. Get them engaged in the conversation. And when you're looking for a job, make sure that the company you pick, that their values and morals align with your values and morals. And last, and most important, when you die, make sure that you've made this world a better place because you walked through it. Thank you very much. My name's Jeffrey Snover. I'm available on Twitter.